Buonasera and welcome to today's JUSTPEACE TALANOA BURE at COVID-19. During and post-COVID-19, today and rebuilding recovery phase in communities and in Fiji. Arising from the challenges of the pandemic, there are a rising number of crises as an impact. Listening to these stories, there are over 1,000 losses of employment. There is the existing impacts of climate change and issues of environment change and further challenges and impacts to human security. Join us with our guests for today's Talanoa, and here with us are Unaisi Carakole Daugunu, the President of the Cakaudrove Youth Council, and Mr. Ovini Baleinamau, the Committee Leader for the Yaubula Marine Life and Protected Area, and also the District Representative of Lekutu District, Bua Province. And Mr. Paulo Baleinakorodawa, the Program Director for Transcend Oceania, who will be moderating today's Talanoa.
Nisambula Vinaka, and welcome to Transcend Oceania's JUSTPEACE Talanoa Bure at COVID-19 on building JUSTPEACE communities in changing environment and climate. Welcome to this episode, Ovini and Una. I also like to welcome you all, viewers who are joining us in this episode from Fiji and around the world. Maybe if we can start this Talanoa with you, saying a little bit more about yourselves, where you come from, who do you represent into this dialogue and Talanoa space, and what's your role in that community or organization? Can we start with you, Una?
Buonasera. My name is Una Daugunu, and I come from Sangani village under the province of the Cakaudrove. Currently, I'm the president of the Cakaudrove Provincial Youth Council, and most of my time I spent working with young people around in my district. Nak.
Thank you, Una. Ovini?
Naka Paulo, Bulre. I'm Ovini Baleinamau. Hails from Bua Province, the district of Lekutu. My village is Wotua, and I represent 8 villages in Matikina as a Matani Tikina, and I represent our Yaubula Committee in the province and leading the Yaubula Committee in our district of Lekutu.
Una, if you can begin by talking about what's the priority issue for you and the young people of Cakaudrove at this time?
One was the youth accessibility to education, that is the employment, and the second one is the communications. For example, in youth accessibility to education, where most of our parents sending their children to Suva, they have to get extra money. It's really, the cost is so high, so that's why they didn't meet the how they send the children to Suva. That's why the youth coming back to the village and perform some social issue like excessive drinking of kava, peer pressure, and they haven't got any fixed goal. And the second is communication, like we do not have regular network. Sometimes we have poor coverage. Its effect in health in times of emergency.
So the two key issues for you is accessibility to education for people in rural communities because parents cannot afford education for their children, so they get pushed back into the community. And the other one is communication problems in relation to youth participation. Thank you, Una. Let's move to Ovini. What for you in the district of Lekutu in the province of Bua, what are the key priority issues for you at the moment?
Naka Paula, the big issue in my district is leadership, and second is the impact of the two big operations in my district. One is the big operation done in the province now is in my district in Lekutu, the pine logging operation. And secondly, as we know that the mining from the province been done in my district 4 years back. And the impact that coastal villages and 3 maritime island villages they've been facing the impact right now.
So, Ovini, I'm interested in the first key priority issue for you about leadership. Can you speak a little bit more about what's the problem with leadership?
Naka Paulo, na lenga e tuko na veluta ke na lomani ni tutikina na kena singa di mandi te tuko na tutu ni veluta ke na lomani tikina. E na buku ni non ro bimba ta tuko ni tutu ro lirua. E na lenga e tarati ni tutukina. Ka singa ni ya ndotu mena ke ni wali sendua me ndambe me zakama na TALANOA me nando na ngau na balavu sa o tingo e via walu nembaki me ado bachu me na ngau ni ko.
Thank you, Ovini, and thank you, Una. We will pick up on the issues you've talked about now in the next segment, and we will take a break now. You are watching Transcend Oceania's JUSTPEACE TALANOA at COVID-19 on building JUSTPEACE communities in changing climate and environment. Join us in the next segment. Welcome to this second segment of this episode. In the previous segment, you have started to talk about the priority issues that you grapple with young people, Una, as the president of the Cakaudrove Provincial Youth, and for you, Ovini, in regards to what's happening in your district with regards to leadership and the developments that are happening there. Can we move the TALANOA now into you talking about what are the challenges surrounding these issues that you have with young people and for you within your district? So you can begin to talk about those challenges and conflicts, and then maybe you can move the conversation to also include the coming of COVID-19 and how COVID-19 brought new challenges to the current and existing challenges that you have. Una, would you like to start?
Vinaka Paula, one of the conflict back into my area was this COVID-19 restrictions about the curfew. Back in my area, I have 2 villages under my district. Most of my young people will end up in court. They break the restrictions of curfew. And I think that was, they haven't got the information. It was just lack of awareness in the area. That's why they end up into court, like the break of curfew.
So one of the key challenges was young people having to abide by the restrictions, and that was very difficult for them, so they end up in court.
They end up in court because they were not well receiving good information, and also they didn't have more information so that they were ready for themselves during the restriction of this COVID-19 curfew.
Thank you, Una. Ovini, what are some of those challenges surrounding those 2 key issues and the challenges that COVID-19 brought to your community?
Naka Paulo, the big challenge in my community is the leadership. When the good leadership is there, then they the one to say yes and no. And mostly in our coastal villages and the maritime villages, they really face this big issue. Previously, they depend on beach diba and other species, and kawa and the 27 species of the kawa group. for their livelihood. And the ban still on now. And the secondly, the impact, it's already there. And that that's why they force them to look for alternative source of income. And the leadership in the village, and no leadership in our district, and people doing their own, and people telling what they want to tell, because there is no leadership in our district right now.
So you're saying that because of the lack of leadership, there is instability in your district, and with regards to COVID-19 and the restrictions it brings, the people are finding it difficult to find sources of livelihood, because there's already taboos and restrictions on what they can get out of the sea in regards to kawakawa and the other species that you're talking about. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. The tambu is there, and the COVID-19 brings plenty families back in the village for their job losses, and they find it hard when these two bans are there, the beach dema and other species ban, and the 27 kawakawa species ban, and they really find it hard for them to survive in the village right now.
Okay, and because village members who have been living in the towns and cities with paid employment coming back into the community,
yes,
being worried about their sources of livelihood, but there are restrictions on what they can get out of the sea for the maritime islands. So Una, you've talked about the challenges surrounding the lack of access to education for young people in your district. Let's now move to the issue about communication and what has COVID-19 brought in as new challenges in terms of communication for young people in your communities?
Vinaka, in communication, we have Form 6 and Form 7 students back home, even Class 1 to and they were given worksheets from the Ministry of Education. From where we stay, it's take 120 kilometers to go to Lambasa town, where we have access in internet. That's why we have sometimes, mostly of the times, we have poor coverage of network, and that's where we can't access to updating the worksheets for our children, mostly for Form 6 and Form 7, even tertiary studies.
So poor network coverage has resulted in students not being able to complete the worksheets for them.
Yeah.
We'll pick this up in the next segment and we'll take a break now. You're watching Transcend Oceania's JUSTPEACE TALANOA BURE at COVID-19 on building JUSTPEACE communities in changing climate and environment. Join us in the next segment. So welcome to this last segment of this episode. In the previous segments, you've talked about the issues that you grapple with. What are the challenges surrounding those issues, and what are the challenges brought in by COVID-19? Let's now move the TALANOA forward to thinking about the way forward. How do we resolve these issues? What are some of the recommendations that you have to resolve the issues that you've talked about in the previous segments? Maybe if you can start with Una.
I recommend the Vanua and some various youth institute stakeholders if to provide enough support to youth by listening to their needs, take time to dialogue with them, and to invest youth and others as youth are the leaders of today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Una. Ovini?
Naka Paulo. Na matai na buku ni bilutaki na lomani ni tu tikina. Mena lomani waluna baki na kena dendeni sengatu na itu ni bilutaki na lomani tu tikina ka kina bolo na sana na bitar ni banua. Ka senga sar nindu bibara ramataki baka boleka. Na buku ni tutu ni bilutaki. Ka ubabi ni bina na Transcend Oceania. Ni walai bondo le tumberi mekina me ole daka mana daka ni mediation na buku ni tutu bobanua na lomani ini tutu kina ya otina bulo so mengarab ungarabi na kasara kila ni wasa sule otina kena tutu na reporte na Transcend Oceania na banua sale adoba na TALANOA na buku ni kena bandita kena tutu ko banua na lomani tiki na waturang o Lekutu. Na kena karua Paulo na buku ni watatambu wa mayado. Na buku ni sasalu kena ika dondi na kandenre. Kau nanuma me ni mata ni tiki na me wa ndalanga taka me wa kerea ke ranitara. Me dengu vir na dengu mena daka sa tiki buta lengo na buli belta na non rai buri saranga nimbula ira mena tulena nungo era ambula nga me witui ningai tambu na sasalu tambu na ika sandu na tamani ndendele bo stabir sarchunga na ngonongo ya ureda chiko ya babu chunga me na ndendeni bilutaki metara kasenga ni ndomo ni tikina dine ni umata ka tuvira na turanga na kaukaua na nonra bukea me bala takita kena bukea irna pambimbi orto na tigo mata sawa kina yanu ni tul na rende saranga rasta ba chunga nongo ka kimami bonu ni tigo ni dua birongo ke pakai singi tarana sasalu metara orto na rusu buka walu na ika korto tamu chungo me bukea na bula ni bu bale na yanu ni tul na lomani tikina na bale
Naka Ovini. So both of you have talked about very practical recommendations and suggestions on how we can respond to the priority issues that you have talked about in this episode. To wrap this episode up, there are viewers who are listening and watching us in this program. If you have one last message that you want to share with everyone listening in, what would that message be for you, Una?
For my message, if we have more visitation, more participation, and more trainings and awareness to be done, not to all you, to be done in all youths in Vasulevu and especially in the Cakaudrove.
Thank you, Ovini.
Pinaka na itutunga na meda batukina na TALANOA na siganiko na kerkeranga na bika na kautome na binaka na non tadaka bata na lomani tikina mambimbi na lomani sana watura ngombua na kena TALANOA taki na kena me bandita ki na tutu wa banua na tutu e kambimbi na ndera ni banua ka tukina mana kena sau na ndera ni banua ka wakatalaki na non rambulo irna bangga rambulo chiko na tiwi anian kau nanuma mendana daga bata oke dana chiko na ndera ni banua chiko i banua na lomani tikina mendana daga bata kiru tu sombenga na chiko na taundau ni mata ni tu Rotumbe kana WCS kartu anraba kartu wakatambu juga sona bota tambu na lomani goling na lomani tikina kangan rebi sarakina non data bata non tu bata kana rawatiki na nabi kabina kana bisi ni mata nobody.
Penaka Ovini, with those key messages, we bring this episode to an end. We thank you very much for your willingness to participate in this TALANOA and to contribute in this TALANOA process. And thank you, viewers, for joining us in this episode.
As we conclude our Just Peace TALANOA Bure at COVID-19, we are reminded that to enable people living just peace and nonviolence in Oceania, we need to create more awareness about climate change, inclusive consultative decisions within the limited resources we have, and our timely responses to human security priorities, protection and recovery moving on, and in the traumatic cycle of COVID-19, and also the effects of TC Herald. I am Vasulevu, the Executive Director, Transcend Oceania.